Guess what excerpt that is? Well, I thought it would be interesting to look into making an excerpt video, not me playing all the excerpts, okay? Not this time. But for our next Train Athletic Craft session, which will be this Saturday, May, let's see, 20th. Pretty sure May 20th. Yeah. At 11 a.m. on Zoom, for those who are interested. I wanted to talk about how do we train ourselves to play excerpts. This category, I know I've spoken about it before, but I want to have a Zoom session about it, but I thought I'd make a little prelim video about it. That'll be useful even if someone doesn't attend the Zoom session. An excerpt is a piece of something, a short little snippet of something, right? But we put so much psychological and emotional weight on them because depending on how an orchestral player, a budding orchestral player, or someone wanting to go to a music conservatory or great university that has a equivalent of a conservatory level at them for sure, they might be asked to play something of the orchestral repertoire. And they'll call that, let me hear the excerpts. Sometimes the school will pick excerpts that they want to hear or give you a few, give you some examples and they pick 3 of them. Something like that. Orchestral auditions, they might give you a list of anywhere from 15 to 35 that you might have to play. Okay? And what do we do with all that? When people come to me and they play excerpts, I can tell right away whether they actually have a relationship with the music or not. I think sometimes people think, well, to get by the first round, we need to play our excerpts as if they were a really good Koprosh, maybe a nice Bordoni, or an Arbans, something like that, just to show our technique. Boy, I'm against that. And I'd like to think that people can go beyond that, even in a first, practicing to get past the first round. To actually say a little bit with something. You don't want to scare anyone. Wow, that sounds too individual. How are you going to fit into the collective? But that's, unfortunately, I see a lot of situations might be a bit like that. Or they want to make sure that they hear some kind of similarity in your training that they have. So then that won't be that hard to fit you in the slot of the opening. But isn't that what a section round is for? To see if the person can kind of, how they're going to fit into the matrix of that section. So I'd much rather hear someone just play it because they have a sentiment for that piece. Now, someone in high school, unless they're very, very serious and they took on the excerpts early on in their training, okay? I'm going to fix the mic just in case it's too soft. They might not have a great sentiment yet, or they might have ones that they really love and love to play because they've actually heard the piece from playing in a youth orchestra or a school orchestra and listening to different recordings, even if it was one favorite one. Because they didn't have, well, these days everyone has access to a lot of recordings with the touch of a button or a key, right? And so when people just say, well, I don't really know but the whole piece, but I know this excerpt, they might as well be playing a Koprash or an Arbans or a Bordoni or any other kind of study. Because it's a whole different ball game when you've built up a relationship with the excerpts as a piece of a whole thing. You know, a branch doesn't exist by itself. It's connected to a bigger branch, and then it's connected to the whole, body of the tree, and then the root system and everything. This is not, let me see this branch. Let me see this finger. Even looking at an organ. Well, that's fascinating. But you're not really getting a feel for its function within the whole and what part it has to play. And so I thought it might be nice for this next, I keep wanting to say athletic first. That's bizarre. But it's train athletic craft into, can we look at these excerpts differently? And can you be brave enough to actually play them differently as opposed to just playing an Arban? Now, if playing it like an Arban or a Koprash or some basic fundamental study that you work on helps you, well, good. That might be a valuable training to work on the excerpts at the level of really raw mechanics and something that's called for in auditions, right? Do you have stability of tempo? Do you have consistency and evenness of sound? And when I say sound, I mean the initial articulation, the head, the body of the note, and the tail, meaning the release. How much basic control do you have over that? If you're going, wow, 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 on individual notes, that could sound like someone doesn't have control. And control means deliberately doing what you want to do. So, we're going to get into this, and we're going to look into how to create an enunciation for articulation that would go with that particular excerpt. What would the body of the note then entail? What would the release be? You see what I'm trying to say? Are you speaking when you're playing? People talk about sing, sing, sing. How about speaking? You ever try that one? How about communicating? Why does it just have to be sing? Maybe years ago, people were just thinking more mechanical and they weren't singing through the instrument. I don't know about that. I've heard recordings from, the early part of last century. I could hear some real musical phrasing and lyricism. And I think that's what people mean by singing. And they mean to play the instrument as if you're just naturally singing. Some people never naturally sang that great. And I'm not talking about, their control over singing. maybe didn't have an urge to go, da, but maybe, they could play it on a keyboard or another instrument that would satisfy that. Right? And for a wind player to think, play it like you're singing, it ties in the air wonderfully and all that. I frankly think about bowing a lot of times. And other times I'll think like a keyboard. I don't think that's common. Could you please sound like a keyboard instrument? You ever try playing your Rochus or Bordonis like you're playing the keyboard? And see what qualities emerge from that? So we're going to get into looking at different ways. Well, what would the beginning of the tuba mira sound, the second trombone solo, if we were going to play it on a piano? Do you have enough control and enough relationship with the piano as an instrument, hearing it, that you can do that? What about clarinet? Or what about oboe? What about French horn? What about cello? What about contrabassoon? What about timpani? And this will also get us out of a stuck formation about how these things need to be played, technically. But offering a variety, oh gosh, I need a little bit of that keyboard here. Ooh, I need a little bit of the cello. Oh, maybe a little bit of the timpani on this excerpt would be good. But that's coming from you building up a relationship and having an idea of what you want to communicate, what you want to say through the medium of music. Knowing that these small snapshots, snippets, sound bites, organs, cells, what part they play within the whole body of the symphony orchestra or the wind ensemble or brass quintet, whatever you're going for. How do they fit in? What function do they have? What's your part saying there? There's so many people who can play the notes great. And more than that. But sometimes someone's coming from a very schooled way. Not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying, you know what? When someone comes forward and they go beyond the well-trained way to create a nice arc to the line, because they actually are saying something of how the music has affected them, you can hear it. You can hear it. And even if that person would say, and I've known many like this, well, I'm just thinking the line goes to here and all that. I'm saying something else in you is resonating to play with the atmospheric resultant that's happening when you play it. You might speak in this kind of technical term and you're thinking the music theory and how this is leading your line. That's not what I'm hearing. So if that works for you and you actually have another thing happening as a result, just because of how something sits in you and you're not totally even aware of it, you just think, well, sure, that's happening because of this and that, technical or theoretical thought. Well, then I guess you're doing it good for you. Other people just thinking along those lines, that's all I hear. No matter how beautiful or lovely or technically, astute it is. So just some thoughts from what we're going to cover on train athletic craft and see about building that craft that can really go someplace when we play an excerpt and not just sit there like a little something on some, microscope slide.